Ravens flock was going on. This is obviously not the ideal way to get our week started. We also, it happened last night or yesterday afternoon. Like, Ravens lost to the Steelers 17-10, and probably the most disappointing way possible, because again, this is now the second game in the first 5 weeks where we end up just giving the game away to a clearly inferior team. Just like how the same thing happened a few weeks ago against the Colts. And a lot of people thought like we were overreacting because when you this isn't even just a problem stemming from this season. This is a problem we've seen happen for many years, where Harbaugh and these coaches have these players come into some of these games not prepared, playing down to their competition, and instead of actually truly stomping these teams out, they're just letting these teams just hang around and hang around and hang around. And before you know it, you end up in a bad spot where all it takes is for one or two big plays to happen. And next thing you know, they're back in the game. And that's exactly what happened. They get a block punt that ended up being a safety. They feeling good about it. And then next thing you know, George Pickens breaks loose. He burns Marlowe and breaks loose and gets a touchdown. Next thing you know, they're in the lead. Like, this game shouldn't have even come down to that. At the end of the day, we or at least on paper, we should have had full control of this game. As a matter of fact, we did have full control of this game. You look down at all the numbers, we had more first downs than them. We had we had the same amount of passing first downs, but then more rushing first downs than them. We were more efficient on third down than they were. We ran 2 more plays than they did. We had like 70, 80 more total yards than they had. We averaged more yards per play. We threw for more passing yards. We had less penalties. This was actually a game where we weren't necessarily killed by penalties, but at the same time, it still was one of those games where we just seemed like undisciplined and not prepared. We even won the time of possession battle, but yet you look up and we only put up 10 points in a game where we should have dropped 30. And unfortunately, the biggest thing that did us in this game were drop passes. You know, giving us all flashbacks to all the seed drops we've seen in seasons past. There were like somewhere around 9 to 10 drops in this game. At least 3 of them were gonna be touchdowns. That one to Andrews, that same drive, the very next play, the one to Bateman. Then, of course, the one to Nelson Aguilar, around the third quarter or something, and the Nelson Aguilar one, that's the only one I really felt bad for, because at the end of the day, outside of that drop, Nelson Aguilar was the only one who I felt was really trying to get the job done and be somewhat consistent. But of course, that drop just really just killed the perception that the Ravens flock are gonna have of the game he had, because that was just 100% embarrassing. And of course, the sports media, they're going to take this, and I'm already seeing these sport media outlets, they're trying to take this and flip this into, man, Lamar struggling. He has to do better now. He's definitely not playing perfect, but at the same time, we watched him ball out for 3.5 quarters and nobody held on to the ball. Now it's giving me flashbacks. It's giving me PTSD flashbacks to all the drops we seen over the years. And I thought we were finally past this. Coming into this game, we had the fewest drops in the NFL. And then all it took was one game to just revert back to the problem we always had, where now we, if I'm not mistaken, now we lead the league in drops just off of this one game. This makes me think back to that Lions game we had back in 2021, where it's you could look up and you think to yourself, man, that was at least 2 or 3 touchdowns and 100 to 150 passing yards just left on the table. It's ridiculous, and then Of course, Lamar's going to get the blame because at the end he threw the pick and also he got stripped with the fumble. But at the same time, I'm like, we shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. We should have had 30 points by then. The starters should have already been sat down by the fourth quarter. We should have been up by that big of a margin. So like it's just definitely just a tough place to be in. Like that, watching, I think his name was Highsmith, get that strip sack on Lamar, and I've been trying so hard to root for Ronnie Stanley, but it's moments like that where I'm like, man, like I want them to keep Ronnie because I do believe he is, when healthy, a good tackle. But at the same time, the health issues combined with you having major mishaps like that, like I don't know. There's not much else I could really say if people say they want to get rid of you at this point. But the only downside is we don't have nobody to replace him with. So as much as people are frustrated with Ronnie, Pat McCarry isn't gonna be like he's not gonna be he can't be a long-term replacement. And we're not gonna find a stud left tackle in free agency because stud left tackles don't make it to free agency. So your only option would be to try to trade one of these teams to get an elite tackle to replace Ronnie with, but that's gonna be very difficult because most teams know how hard it is to find a good left tackle. So they're gonna want you to give everything just to get a shot at them trading for that guy, just to get a shot at them letting you trade for this tackle. So I don't know what the Ravens' plans are going to be when it comes to Ronnie Stanley in the future. And I don't know what their plans are going to be with Rashad Bateman at this point. You know, I was definitely rooting for Rashad Bateman. I was expecting him to have a major breakout season. I was expecting him to finally get the injury bug off of his resume and really start to show what he's made of. But he's just been a complete non-factor in these first couple weeks. I don't know what it is. Like, Todd Monken just doesn't seem too interested in getting him involved like that. And then on the rare occasions where he's getting the opportunity, he's not making the most of it. Like that touchdown, you can't throw a better pass than that. Like that ball it essentially smacked him in the face. Like just what that ball was thrown, that ball was directly in his face, directly in his hands, and he just it like almost like he just scared himself, and instead of just pulling it in, he just like batted it back. You know, and then obviously like he deleted his social media or I don't know if he permanently deleted it or whatever, but he took that down. Obviously he's frustrated. Everybody's frustrated, but this is now a situation where now, unfortunately, now you're entering like bust territory when you look at the start of your career so far. So it's definitely a weird thing to witness. You know, even though Hollywood wasn't a stud number one kind of receiver, you know, Hollywood did have big moments, and overall, he still was a solid receiver that you can't call him a bust. But in the case of Rashad Bateman, it's like having a horse in a race who won't even leave the stable. Like it's just like he's not even really showing the ability to get out and get started on the race. You know, at least the first 2 years, we saw him make a lot of big plays. So far this year, it's just been MIA. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if he still has the injury and he's not fully trusting his body. I don't know if Todd Monken just has a personal issue with him and doesn't care to get him involved. I'm not really sure. One person that I definitely think that Todd Monken, and I'm, because this was even a problem with Greg Roman, and then you got to just say it's a Harbaugh thing. For some reason, Harbaugh doesn't like Gus Edwards. Like, it's blowing my mind that we still, you know, game after game, we're still doing this running back by committee bullshit. For what? Let Gus get 15 to 20 carries a game. On his career, he's averaging 5 yards a carry. He is clearly our best running back, and yet still they want to do whatever it takes to get Justice Hill more involved than Gus. And I have nothing against Gus's Hill, obviously. I mean, I have nothing against Justice Hill, obviously. It still was frustrating to see him get that fumble. And then even after getting that fumble, he was still, you would still see him go out there and, be a part of snaps. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, bro, you got to pick one running back and just make him your premier back. Like, we're still doing this running back by committee nonsense where you'll see Gus now Gus had about 12 carries here, which isn't too bad, but at the same time, like I said, I want to see him get 15 to 20, especially since Gus typically plays fairly well against Pittsburgh. He usually handles their physicality well, which isn't surprising because he's a power back. Everybody calls him Gus the Bus for a reason. But it's so ridiculous. Like, they don't want to just give it to Gus on a more consistent basis and just let him start to get hot and cook. Like, you see Gus go out there here and there, then you see him come out, and then they put in Justice. Some games, then they'll put in Melvin Gordon, Kenyon Drake, whoever. Like, and it's just like, why can't you just let Gus cook? Especially towards the end of that game when we were lucky enough to get that fumble on the punt return that put us at like the 7-yard line. The very first play, Gus got the ball. He ran for 4 yards. So now we were on I think it was like the 3-yard line at that point. They immediately take Gus out. Like what sense does that make? They immediately took Gus out. And then we started passing the ball, which again, I'm not against us passing in red zone situations. I mean, we were scoring on, prior to this game, we were scoring on 80% of our red zone drives. So I'm not against it. But context matters. At the end of the day, the receivers had 9 drop passes. The receivers and Mark Andrews had 9 drop passes in this game. With the game on the line in an easy situation, the only options like that when we are on like the 3-yard line at that point, the only logical options in that context should be either to let Lamar run it, which is something they was doing the past 2 weeks and it worked perfectly, or give the ball to Gus again and again and just let him power his way through into that end zone, which I absolutely believe he would have done. But unfortunately, like that's not what happened. They threw like a pitch pass to Andrews. It didn't work out. Lamar took a risk. He tried to throw up a 50-50 ball to Odell. It was a bad pass. It was short. Then like Joey Porter intercepted it. Like Odell was he was out there. He got I don't know if he got like hurt or either way he got like banged up again in this game. And I've been so excited for the prospect of Odell coming here and like the potential of what it could be. And so far, it hasn't really amounted to much. Like, it's starting to look like Deshaun Jackson situation last year. Y'all know how much I didn't like that Deshaun Jackson move. Not because he's not talented. He is talented. But again, because of his age and because of the fact that he couldn't stay on the field, I just didn't want to. I just didn't think it was the way to go. And now, unfortunately, so far, the Odell signing is looking like a similar situation. I know a lot of people are pointing at D-Hop balling out in Tennessee right now. It is what it is. I don't really know what the Ravens are going to try to do over the next couple weeks to fix these issues. Ideally, you would want to just see the players play better. That of course would be like the ultimate thing that would just really just get things back in order, really just quiet and put all these question marks to bed. But it's yet to be seen if we're going to be able to do that right now. Again, we're still in a good position. There's still a reason to be optimistic. But at the same time, it's just like we could get away with this stuff right now, but our schedule is going to get harder from here. And then we still got to think about the playoffs. And like this is the type of stuff that could get people exposed. And real quick, I got to go back to, I think it was at the end of the half when instead of like kicking a field goal or a timeout or whatever, I forgot what happened exactly. I just know Tyler Linderbaum snapped the ball when he shouldn't have snapped the ball. And then I saw it. Apparently Tyler came out and did an interview claiming that he thought somebody was offsides, and so he decided to snap it to get the free flag. I can't wrap my head around that. even though Tyler Linderbaum has been a really good player so far in these 2 seasons, you don't have enough juice to be able to make an executive decision like that. That should simply not be something like you can't do that. Assuming that he actually did that on his own free will and wasn't told to do that, you can't be out here making those type of wild decisions as if you're like a 10-year vet who knows this or that. Like it didn't make the slightest bit of sense. It didn't make the slightest bit of sense. And while part of me wants to get at Todd Monken, but at the same time, because part of me wants to get at him because I'm not understanding some of these coaching decisions, such as not giving Gus Edwards the ball more, especially in goal line situations. But at the same time, I don't want to go too hard on Todd Monken because so far when you're watching his scheme play out, these receivers are getting open. It's not like, oh, they're not getting open and they're dropping passes and Lamar's not hitting them and this and that. It's like, nah, Lamar for 3.5 quarters was putting every single ball on the money, dropping dimes. Todd Monken was scheming up plays that was allowing these receivers and tight ends to get opportunities, to get open, to make a play. And even to these receivers' credit, they were running their routes well enough to get open in the first place. But then it boils down to execution. They were dropping passes and they were stumbling. Like you seen that play with Zay Flowers, like he was running up the field like I think Minkah Fitzpatrick was on him. He was running up the field. He was like 40 yards down the field at that point. Minkah was like maybe 5-10 yards behind him or whatever. And then he just stumbled. And I think he simply stumbled because in that moment he just lost track of the ball and he just didn't know where he wanted to go. And then he just tripped. Like, some people said that ball was behind him, man. That ball was not behind him, man. If he would have just stayed in stride and if he still had known where the ball was, he would have caught that and took that to the house. That was another touchdown opportunity left on the table. Like, this game should have been a blowout. It should have easily been a blowout. Our defense held the Steelers to like 5 points through the first 3.5 quarters. They had like 3 points. And then, obviously they got the safety, so it was like 5 points. Like this was the ideal scenario where we could have easily ripped their hearts out by the third quarter. This could have been done. It could have been 31-3 by the third quarter. And then from there, that situation wouldn't have... there's no way the Steelers offense would have been trying to fight back at that point because they don't have a good offense. Their only real option is Kenny Pickett. I mean George Pickens, excuse me. It's George Pickens. Kenny Pickett is not a good quarterback. And we got him out here looking halfway competent. It doesn't... And part of the reason he started to look halfway competent is because we, again, just like in the Colts game, we kept letting them linger around. We kept letting the game be close enough to give them hope. And that's the problem. We didn't rip their souls out. We didn't take their souls. And the opportunity was there. Going into the fourth quarter, their whole offense only had 80 yards all day. So, I'm not sure where we go from here. We're still in a solid position. We're 3-2. We're 2-1 in the division. All our road division games are done now. We got a tough schedule, but at the same time, in my opinion, there's still winnable games. Obviously, we're gonna go to London to play the Titans next week. Again, the opportunity is there. It just boils down to, can it be executed? I don't know why Harbaugh struggles to get these players to be prepared every week and to be ready to execute. This team lacks a killer instinct. That's really one of the biggest issues that a lot of this boils down to. This team lacks that killer instinct. And I think that goes all the way up to the fact that Harbaugh lacks that killer instinct. He's more concerned with just saving himself and doing just enough to try to get by. He's not concerned with stomping these teams out. You watch these other teams in the NFL, and so many of these other teams have killer instincts. They don't want to let their foot off the gas. We just watched the fucking Dolphins go out and put up 70 points. And then the very next week, we watched the Bills go up against the Dolphins and they put up like 48. We're watching all these other teams, when they get rolling, they're not playing it safe. When they get rolling, they're not making these same questionable decisions that we're making when the opportunities are there. And they're also executing when they get the opportunity to execute. So I don't know where exactly we go from here, because again, on paper we have everything that we need, but it boils down to the fact that we're not executing. And in the first couple weeks, including the Colts game, I let it slide because I'm like, hey, you know what? It's the first couple games. We didn't play the preseason. So I'm like, so in my head, I'm like, yeah, we need a little more time to let the rust get off. But now it's like you look up, we're in week 5 now. We're about to be in week 6. We gotta go to London. And we're still having like these same hiccups. Like we're still not like, we're still struggling to put the pieces together, and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, man, it's definitely a tough loss. I had to get that off my chest. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know, what do you think needs to be fixed? Who do you think needs to be traded? What signings do you think we should make to try to really get this back on the right track? Do you think that they'll be willing to fire Harbaugh in the middle of the season? And one last thing, like the tough part about firing Harbaugh is he's in like the ideal situation for a lot of coaches, where he has a star quarterback who really doesn't get blown out. Because I do believe if we got blown out one good time, like the Dolphins, when they blew out the Broncos by 7, they blew them out by 50. Like the score was 70-20 a couple weeks ago. Like if we had one of those type of games where we just got completely embarrassed, I do believe they would finally let Harbaugh go at that point. But the problem is Lamar Jackson doesn't get blown out. He very rarely loses, and then when he does lose, it's usually not by much. I can only think of 3 games in his career so far where we lost by more than 2 scores. I can only think of 2 or 3 games where we lost by 14 or more points. Like that that Bills playoff game back in 2020. When we played the Bengals in 2021, we lost by like 17. And then that first Titans playoff game in 2019 where we lost by like 16. Those like you can count you can count the few times where we lost by 14 or more points. We usually don't get blown out. And unfortunately, because so many of these games are so close that we have a shot, I do believe that constantly gives Harbaugh an excuse to where he could, they could always be like, hey, we just need to fix this or tweak that. And so because of that, I think that EDCs, if they do fire him, they would still end up waiting until the end of the season. They wouldn't rush to do it mid-season because we haven't had a true mid-season collapse yet. Like we've had these mishaps, but these aren't like true collapses because we're not losing by a significant amount of points. And we're most likely never going to, because with the defense playing the way it's playing and with Lamar being in the game, we always have a chance. So it's a tough place to be at, man. Let me know what your thoughts are.